I think one of the biggest challenges that every company has these days is the build versus buy dilemma at the buying side. So you want to sell a service, a product, whatever, to a company that has something to do with software. And I think at every boardroom today and at every executive room today, there is always a discussion. Should we buy that product, or maybe we can just build it ourselves because building has become so easy? And I think that is probably the biggest issue that every AI company, doesn't matter how amazing they are, is going to deal with. How can we sell a product that the other side actually thinks maybe we can just build it ourselves?
Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spiro Circle, this time in collaboration with Forbes Israel. This week I spoke to Daniel Zahavi, one of the co-founders of Arito. Arito is an AI company that helps finance teams with their AI stacks and platforms. But one of the overriding themes of today's episode is simply survival. Daniel was born and raised in Iran and moved to Israel at 15 to escape the Iran-Iraq war. Then he founded a company that was banned by the Israeli government to be exported. Now he's building a new company in the AI era where companies like Anthropic or OpenAI are killing people's startups with a simple feature or product update. So we spoke about all of this. We spoke about what it means to always have to navigate and adjust and pivot, and the overriding theme of resilience. So I haven't spoken to many people whose story, both personally and professionally, encompasses that theme so strongly. I also had my own technical issues throughout the episode, so I could also relate to the theme of survival. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
There is so much I want to discuss with you today, and there's such an interesting through line that I've identified with not only your story, but also your career. And that is basically the story of survival. And it's whether you are moving from place to place or navigating different industries or different companies, you've always managed to kind of work around some of the obstacles that come your way. So I do want to start, as most people do, at the beginning. And I want to hear about your story way back before a career was born, and your journey leaving Iran and coming to Israel. So can you please just tell the audience or the viewers who may not be familiar what it is that brings you here today, please?
Yeah, sure. Wow, like looking back at things, it kind of feels like a different time, a different world, kind of a parallel world that I was almost in. I was born and raised until the age of 16 in Iran, living as a Jewish family within a huge city of obviously not Jewish community. And we have always been kind of keeping I want to say low profile, want to make sure like you live your life and live and let live, obviously. But as I think, as is the case with many other Jewish families which are not in Israel, there is a Jewish saying that says next year in Jerusalem. And like Jewish families say that every Passover, every year, everyone's talking about that. So it's kind of on the back of your head, almost in your DNA as a Jewish family, that you should eventually be in Jerusalem. So when we get the age of 15, 16, I think my parents kind of came to us, me and my brother, and kind of said, okay, guys, we don't see a future in this company for you two specifically. As two Jewish boys, we want to move to Israel specifically for you guys to have a brighter future. And I know in doing that, they gave up a lot. They gave up almost their careers. They gave up a very comfortable life that they had. Most of Jewish families have a very comfortable life abroad. And from economical perspective, and I think they gave up a lot specifically for us to have a better future. So when we got here, knowing that how much they have given up, we almost had kind of a responsibility to make sure that it was worthwhile and make sure that we do our best to actually realize that future that they have always wanted for us. So that was kind of the whole thing. It was not an easy path. Many people ask me, "Hey, how did you even leave Iran and come to Israel?" Because there is no diplomatic relationship between two countries. And sometimes I kind of just make a joke, just how playful I want to be, and say like, guys, you don't know, we took a canoe and like four of us like canoeing on the river until we got to Israel. And we know us really? I was like, no, not really. We just flew doing a Boeing 777 to Turkey, just saying, hey, we're over for a short vacation that we never came back from. So it was not as exciting as like using a canoe, but it was definitely having a short profile, because Jewish, obviously you cannot move to Israel. You can even the Jewish community, they don't even get a passport. Like the process of getting a passport in Israel for the Jewish families are like 2 years. And many of them don't get that. But we were lucky enough to get that. We moved to Israel when I was 16. Obviously, getting to Israel was not easy. Small children or teenagers can be mean many times, and obviously coming to Israel and not knowing how to speak Hebrew, and or speaking Hebrew with a very, very heavy Iranian accent, it was a cause for a lot of people around to kind of laugh and make fun of my accent. I remember as a kid, I took that really hard, because it was really hard to get into a new community that you don't have any friends, and everybody's around just making laugh your accent. So it was not a very easy landing, but we are our family. We are together always. We keep it together. Like we have a strong, I want to say, core as a family. So we kind of just went through it. And when we got to Israel, I think what we wanted to do, what our parents wanted to do, was kind of to recreate the same level of education that we had before, and obviously increase that. So I was accepted in a gifted programs in Israel. I started there, and when I got to that school, I think that was the first time that I thought, okay, maybe this is going to be okay. And to this day, the best friends that I have are the friends that I met like 20 years ago in that school the first day. They remain my best friends up till today. That was kind of the moving from a personal perspective from Iran to Israel as a kind of a Jewish family.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. What did that teach you, that a move like that, like you just said, moving to a new country with a new language, new culture, and this was a few years ago, this isn't even nowadays, which is kind of as easy as it's ever been. What did that teach you about resilience? Because you hear that word so often nowadays: startup nation, resilience, Israeli founder. And young children are required to have a hell of a lot of resilience, especially in the moments that you've just outlined. So do you think that, what part do you think that played in where you are today? And then we'll get into kind of where you are today and
Sure.
and the company and what you folks do.
Definitely. I think that one of the first things that, like, if there was a school for startups that you would go to be like an entrepreneur, I think one of the first lessons that they would teach you is how to survive, or even like keep surviving until you make it. That's one of the like number one rules of a startup, and always adapt to changes. Like make sure, specifically, I think in a startup mind, especially an earlier stage startup, one of the most important aspects is like doing fast iterations, adapting yourself to the market. Many startups don't know yet what to build and what's the product that is going to win the market, or even what the market needs are. You have some assumptions that you work based on those, but you don't really know what's actually going to stick. So you do a lot of iterations, and you need to adapt to a lot of changes, and you need to recalculate your route all the time, and be really adapt to changes. And I think it has a lot of similarities to where I was as like an immigrant. Like I'm talking about, like, there are many, myself as an immigrant, and I'm sure that many other immigrants feel the same. I'm sure that you kind of feel the same when we move to Israel, that we need to learn really quick what it takes to be successful in this new environment, how this new environment is actually, what do they treat as success, as how do you value, what are the new values of in this new environment that we are in, and how can we, what do we need to do to be really successful? And you kind of experiment and iterate with that a lot. And like, if you are able to do that at a almost, as you mentioned, be completely resilient to failure, which is, hey, failure is just another step until I reach the goal that I have. Then you eventually learn those new rules and you become successful in this new environment. And I think that's exactly what the startups are about. They're like a lot of experiments, a lot of iterations, trial and error, adapting to new rules, understanding what it takes to be successful, trying to optimize on that, fail a few times, and until you actually reach the final goal. So I think it was a very good school for me. Like I said, there is no entrepreneur school, but if there was one, being a migrant is definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. And speaking from experience as well, like as you just mentioned with coming to Israel and being a new immigrant, as you mentioned, I did it a bit later in life, but I certainly at a later time as well. But I certainly identified with some of the struggles you outlined there. I want to fast forward a bit now to what you were mentioning about what you were studying and what you were doing, because you mentioned that you were doing information theory, which is not so commonly known or understood. So for those who are unfamiliar, what is that exactly? And what are some of the things that you learn to spot or learn to study through something like that?
Yeah. So yeah, I did my PhD in information theory. I mean, information theory is, I want to say, is kind of a new field. It started in 48, I want to say, with amazing paper done by Claude Shannon, which I think is probably one of the figures that has probably the highest and biggest effect of where we are today as humans, like the digital realm, where AI is today, like everything that's happening around technology. I think Claude Shannon had a big part of that. Many people don't realize that, and many people are not familiar with him. I think definitely that's something that if you have 5 minutes, just go read about it online, who that person was and what he did for where the technology is. Information theory is so kind of a new field. It learns it is, as it says, like information. Basically, the simplest question in information theory is that if you observe an event, what can you learn from it? By just observing that event, and that's the basic for communication. That's the basic for it. It has a lot of modeling in it. How do we even model what we have observed from one side to the other side? And one of the stuff that you can actually model with, I think in one of the earlier papers in Shannon kind of talked about how to model the English language. How can we build a function, a statistical function that describes what's the English language, so that if I know a few words, how can I say what's the most probable next word? And he did that like tens of years ago. And fast forward today, that is kind of the entire architecture of large language models. Large language models are basically estimation of the language that you're representing, in this case an English, so that they are, I want to say, a very sophisticated autocomplete, that in case that you are asking something, they know what's the next probable word and the one after that and the one after that. And they actually create that and collect that into creating a sentence. And that's become the AI as we know it today. So information theory, I think it had, for me, it was mostly understanding the roots of the statistics of how AI is actually performing. I think a lot of what we are doing today, by really understanding how AI models and how large language models in practice actually perform, and what we can and cannot expect from them, and what are the best use cases for them, and how to leverage them to actually solve business questions. I think that gave me specifically, and gave the company that we are building today, a lot when it comes to understanding the benefit and realizing that benefit for the businesses that we kind of serve.
That oversight into your story and your journey to Israel, and then the education you had here, and then the industry that you were mentioning about AI and LLMs, takes us perfectly to what you folks are doing today at Arito. So if I could just kind of give a bit of an overview, and then I'm sure you'll correct me on some of the details, but you folks were founded last year and you've raised $6 million in seed. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So can you talk me through a bit about what the company does exactly and where you're operating in this AI space that we just kind of highlighted?
Arito is an AI platform. It's an agentic analytics and monitoring platform, which is purpose-built for finance and revenue teams. It allows them analyze their business data in real time, get insights created by AI, and obviously continuously monitor what's happening in their business. We essentially built a platform that allows these teams to connect their data sources. It can be their ERPs, CRMs, and yes, those 250 Excel files that they have all over in one place, and be able to generate insights from that data. So finance teams use our platform, for instance, for budget planning, budget tracking, forecasting, and revenue teams use our platform for better pipeline analysis, account management, optimizing the revenue, etc. So there are a lot of different use cases around what Arito can and cannot do. And I think that's a great question. Where do we fit within this in this industry of AI, which is kind of new? It's kind of going to have a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, but it's obviously progressing so fast that it seems like it's like 10 years old, but it's not. It's pretty young. And I think the what's happening today with the industry is very interesting, because we have the AI models, which is like Claude and Gemini and GPT, etc., that each day kind of bring new features and new capabilities. And the question is, okay, if these models are getting better and better, where do you fit? And I think our platform, what makes it different from what's else today, is that we create value, we create continuous long-term value for our customers. I think the biggest piece is that while most of these AI models are mostly focused on creating short-term artifacts, you ask a question, you get an answer. You ask to create a code, you get that code. You want a picture, you get a picture. Next thing, you have to be in charge of what to do next and how to maintain that and what to do with that. I think we take a different approach. We help companies create workflows and create artifacts that continue creating value for them over time. We take care of the maintenance. We take care of aggregating that knowledge over time, because I think the biggest piece that is unsolved today is how do we take the business logic of a company and how do we make that accessible for AI? And that business logic is something that changes over time, but you need to slowly learn it and continue maintaining that knowledge and creating that knowledge base and continue maintaining it over time. And I think that's one of the pieces that Arito is best at, understanding what are the workflows, what are the business logic, what is the business context of a company, and being able to maintain that over time so that AI models can actually use that. And we believe that a lot of that context sits with finance and revenue teams. And that's why our platform is directed as those two teams, because we believe that they make most of the strategic decisions in a company, and we want to be able to bring them the best tools to make the best decisions.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I've had this conversation before with people about the dreaded founder morning where he or she opens up X and sees that Anthropic has released a new feature, just like a small feature in Claude, and now their startup is kind of dead because AI companies are kind of maybe reckoning with the fact that they're not building products as much as they're just building features that other companies can adopt just as much. So I want to touch on what you've just said now about sitting in the finance teams because they have the knowledge and of the data and understanding. You described that to me before as tribal knowledge. So you described these teams as having this tribal knowledge over the companies and the information and where all of these things sit. Talk me through that. What did you mean by that exactly? And then why is it that the finance teams sit at the heart of that? Because you might think it's HR, you might think it's legal, you might think it's management. I mean, talk me through the je ne sais quoi of the finance team.
Definitely. So what I mean by tribal knowledge is that, like, the bigger the companies become, the more diverse their data sources become. Like, there is data in Salesforce and there is data in NetSuite, and then they have a lot of Excel files that each one of them is there a lot of business logic in those. And also there are a lot of stuff that everybody knows, but it's not written anywhere. How do we define what an active customer is? So we may ask something. There's a common understanding of what do we consider an active customer, but it's not really written anywhere. Those are those things that everybody knows, and those are the kind of culture guidelines that everyone acts and behaves according to, but they are not explicitly said or written anywhere. And there's a lot of those. And the bigger the company becomes, there is more and more of those unwritten rules and unwritten guidelines that everybody knows, but it's not written anywhere. And I think that's a lot of what I mean by tribal knowledge, like the way that the company operates, what they do, and it's not just written anywhere. It's not like I can tap into a Word document and just read it and say, okay, that's how they operate. It's not. The only way to actually capture that is from an interaction with the members of that company, just talking to them, see how they work, doing the interaction with them, and then learning how that is done. And that's kind of when a new employee comes into a company, that's what it does in their onboarding. It takes 2 to 3 months until they learn exactly how that company operates and what's the business logic and how shall they do their job. And I think many times that correlation between Claude and Gemini and all of that with a very, very smart person that enters a new company. Assume a very smart PhD graduate that enters a new company and wants to start working there. Will he be completely productive from the first moment? Probably no. He still doesn't know what's important, what goals should they make, how do they operate, what's the business logic, what are the different interfaces that it needs to handle, how important everything is. Like it needs to learn all of that. And after 2, 3, 4 months, that person becomes very, very productive and can be a game changer. So I many times talk about AI models as a fresh PhD graduate that is entering a new company. Just connecting it to the data sources and say, okay, go, is probably not going to be really when it needs to learn the business logic and to learn the company. And the only way to learning that is by doing interaction with the people. So that's a lot of tribal knowledge. And when we built Arito, we put a lot of emphasis on a product that gets smarter and better the more that interacts with the users. So it learns from them, it collects its feedback, understands what's important, where does the data that is actually important sits, how do they define certain terms, what do they define as an important business event, etc., etc. It learns all of that and continues learning as the company kind of evolves. So that the whole piece, that's what I call a tribal knowledge. And the reason that it sits with the finance teams, at least that is our guideline, is because when you think about it, the finance team is probably the one that has the highest number of interfaces among any other teams in a company. They interact internally with all the different business units and different teams. They interact with the C-level, they interact with the board, they interact with the customers, they interact with suppliers, they interact with authorities. So the entire map of all the interfaces, the only team that has all of these interfaces is the finance team. So they see all the data and they need to eventually, I think the modern CFO is probably the biggest strategist, maybe after the CEO, is the biggest strategist of a company, and he needs all of that data to make the right decisions. And there is a reason when for, I want to say, analyst guidelines, is the CFO that stands out there and says, okay, how does he see the future? And I think that just gives an example of how important that role has become. And we think that the finance team are the most strategic ones probably, and that is the reason that we started focusing on the finance team first. What we learned eventually is that they work very, very closely with the go-to-market and revenue teams, and together they kind of form that strategic partnerships. And that's why we kind of expanded also our Arito for not just for the finance teams, but also the finance and revenue teams, because they work so closely together and they are concerned and they ask and they are interested in many, many similar things. And that's why kind of we focus on those two teams. I hope that answers your question.
No, it's amazing. It was a perfect explanation. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. What the reason why I'm like pausing a bit is because I'm thinking about how the modern day workplace, you know, I hear time and time again that these different departments operate with other departments in so many ways that are different from maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So it's a lot more merged, it's a lot more connected. And some of that is maybe, you know, the open office plans from the 2000s, but also it's, as you said, it's these stacks that need to be organized and streamlined. So Are there any tensions that you see that come up between the finance teams and maybe, as I mentioned, the legal team or the marketing team or the VPs? Are
Yeah,
there
yeah,
any tensions that come into place, and or product even maybe?
definitely.
Where does it sometimes not go so smoothly?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I can tell you where we have seen some challenges, especially when it comes with AI. I think probably the most of the tension that we have seen has been between finance and revenue teams, which are our end users, and more of the data and BI teams. I think we have seen a lot of tension there. And the reason for that is that the finance and revenue teams, they are still pretty much dependent on data and BI teams for a lot of the insights or reports or workflows that they want to create. Because they don't have the tools, they are very much dependent on data and BI teams. And that was one of the problems, one of the pains for these teams that we wanted to help with Arita, because like the data and BI teams, they are buried under so much work as it is, and we wanted to take I want to say the easiest part of their jobs, the ones that there is a lot of them and they spend a lot of time, the repetitive part, and kind of automate that, so they can actually go and focus on more strategic things. So we came basically, when we come to finance revenue teams, we say, hey, you can be self-serve right now. You can actually access your data, use your data, make insights of it yourself without being dependent. But obviously that there's a tension there, because many times BI and data teams, they feel like, hey, you're kind of overstepping here. This is our role. How come you come here and try to give these teams also service, a kind of a create value for them, that's for us, you should go through us first. So we see that tension, and it's interesting we'll see how it actually going to play out, because this is not here. I mean, every AI company that is creating a product for a customer, eventually that product is augmenting and many times even replacing something that a person has been doing. So there is always going to be a tension. But I think the successful companies are the ones going to the start of our conversation that kind of adopt the fastest. They understand that there are new rules, new technologies, that change is inevitable, and they just redefine themselves and adapt to the new situation rather than staying back. So I believe that is the future, but the current tension is there, and we just need to work with it.
I told you, man, it ties into the theme at the start of survival, whether it's the AI cycle or the company or the immigration. I'm enjoying the theme that's the through line throughout everything that we're talking about today. So I do want to touch on the kind of approaching the kind of last segment that we had planned to talk about, which is the AI hype cycle in itself, right? Because we've spoken about Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT, and we've spoken about how founders and companies may struggle there. We've spoken about you folks and what you do, especially in the departments that you operate in. Is there a part of today's narrative, not even today's conversation, but kind of more broadly, is there anything that's just completely overhyped, or are we supposed to be terrified? I mean, you used the word replace earlier in your answer, and I thought, oh God, not replace. That's the word that people can't use when we're talking about AI. So is there anything that in the narrative today that's being overhyped at all or misunderstood maybe?
Yeah, so I'll tell you something first, which I think is interesting, and then I'll kind of lean to the answer to that question. I think I have been thinking about this a lot. Of like I think we can all agree that this is kind of a revolution. Like, it's an AI. This is a very big shift in an industry that is happening. And I think when you want to talk about, hey, what these revolutions have taught us in the past, what has happened in the past, I think we can probably think about introduction of cloud computing as a big major step in the industry. And I think before that, we can think about mobile. Like when mobile phones were introduced, I think the industry had a very big shift, or our entire lives changed. So we have the mobile, we have the cloud computing, the whole SaaS became a thing, and now we have AI. And there are a lot of similarities, but there is one thing that is very, very different in this one rather than two previous ones. And I think in the two previous ones, when it was the mobile and was the cloud, I always feel that there was like a symbiotic relationship between the providers of the infrastructure and the creators of the value chain on top of that. So we had Apple and Samsung creating iPhones, these things, and we had a huge ecosystem of application providers, and they needed each other. For iPhone to be useful, there needs to be a lot of applications on top of it. And if you have the application, but not everyone has an iPhone in their pocket, then probably you don't have a very good business. So they needed each other, and they needed to kind of throw together. And the same thing happened with cloud, with the cloud computing, right? You had AWS and Google and Azure at Microsoft creating this infrastructure, and you had other application creators, SaaS providers on top of that, and they needed each other. So they kind of created a value together, and they grow together. And I think this is the first time that I feel maybe it's not exactly the same, because we have the large language models and AI providers. We have Claude, and we have GPT, and we have Gemini, and back to your previous point. And it seems to me that every day there is kind of a new thing that eventually comes and tries to kill a lot of startups or a lot of companies that are actually building on top of Claude. So it's kind of almost like shooting themselves in the foot. And I think that's different. That's completely different. So anything that I will say about whether it is a hype or not, I cannot really correlate it back to the past experience, because this one's different from that. Like the very core of it, that symbiotic relationship is not as strong as it was before. Now, to your question, whether there is a hype or not, I think one of the biggest challenges that every company has these days is the build versus buy dilemma at the buying side. So you want to sell a service, a product, whatever, to a company that has something to do with software. I'm not talking about the hardware yet. Let's focus on the software side of the things. And I think at every boardroom today and at every executive room today, there is always a discussion. Should we buy that product, or maybe we can just build it ourselves because building has become so easy? Shall we just do that? And I think that is probably the biggest issue that every AI company, doesn't matter how amazing they are, is going to deal with. How can we sell a product that the other side actually thinks maybe we can just build it ourselves? And my experience says that right now we are at the very top of that hype cycle, that everyone believes that they can build whatever they need themselves easily, and it will solve their problem. And the reason that I think that's at the top of the hype, and that eventually it's going to come down and become way lower, is because, and this is kind of my philosophy, the amount of people that I think know exactly what they need and what they want is not very high. Like the percentage of the people that know that is not very high. Now, the person from that sector, I want to say the portion that knows exactly how to define with language what they want or need, is even lower. Now, in order to go and ask an AI model to create something for you that creates value, you need to first know what is it that you need, and then you need to know exactly how to describe that in a very high resolution so that you can actually get what you need. I think the amount of people that have both is very low. So I don't think the hype right now that, hey, we can build everything that we want, is actually going to last a long time. I think eventually a lot of people will realize that it's not really easy to define exactly what to build. It's not really easy to understand what is it important that creates value. And I'm not even talking about maintaining something over time and taking care of security and privacy. Like, there's so much more. Like, creating the software is only, writing the code is only like the first part. Like a lot of the actually challenge continues afterwards. How do we maintain the whole thing? Maintenance is a way bigger part of creating at the first time. So
You've given me so much to think about, and one of the things that came to my mind during your answer just now was the so-called mobile-geddon from about 10 years ago when, as you mentioned, everything was moving from kind of desktop, laptop to mobile, and how companies were pivoting their behavior. And then now the so-called SaaS apocalypse, where you've got these AI SaaS companies that are, really struggling as you said, companies are doing it themselves what they used to purchase or acquire. And I used to speak to many founders who they would never admit it to me openly, but it was quite clear that their exit goal was to be acquired. They like to found a company, they like to establish a company, they like to build a product, but they didn't really want to run a company. They wanted to sell it and make a bit of money and build another company and start again. They're very 0 to 1 people. And so you've given me a lot to think about how this AI era is kind of adjusting all of that. So I suppose one of my last questions I have for you today is, what should business leaders be doing today to absorb all of this information, whether it's the companies that may not be acquiring smaller companies like you mentioned, or whether it's at risk of being obsolete entirely, or anything? I mean, what's a business leader today doing, or what should they know today that maybe they didn't need to know 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think let's probably divide that into 2 groups: the provider and the consumer side of the business. So we have businesses creating something, and we have businesses buying something. So I think for the ones that are creating something for others to use, for example, ourselves, we at Arito, we do exactly that. We create something that we sell to other businesses. I think the only question that they need to ask themselves is, are they creating continuous long-term value for their customers, and not just a one-off thing that can be solved easily? Because if it's a one-off thing, then the chances of them being replaced by an AI prompt is very, very high. Can they create a stickiness of a product that needs to be used over time after time, day after day, to actually create value and solve the real big pain? Like, if they do that, then I think they are on the safe side. And I think for the buying, the ones that are out there for buying tools or want to create tools themselves, I think the only question that they need to ask themselves is, do we have our data and business logic ready for AI to actually harness? Do we have everything in a format or in a shape that an AI agent can come into and then create value from it, whether that's automating something, creating insights, or anything else? And if we don't have that right now, how do we do that? How we create that? How we take our business logic and bring it in a shape and format that AI can in the future leverage? Because I think that's inevitable that eventually AI will be very, very common in a lot of businesses doing a lot of work. Now, the question is the ones that can actually leverage it to its fullest potential, or the ones that are going to win the race. I think those are the 2 things.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you, Daniel. You've given me so much to think about, and you've given me so many different angles to examine some of the discussions that we've had today, because I hear from so many founders and so many companies about different things. And I always like to walk away from conversations like this with brand new insights. And so you've certainly offered those to me today. So thank you so much. I do want to end our conversation now. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I do want to end how I often do, which is with a quickfire round. So I want to shoot some questions at you, and I want short, instant answers. First thing that comes to mind, repeat it back to me as quick as you can. So,
Sure.
What is the most overrated AI buzzword?
Automation.
What's the most underrated AI company?
Probably Google.
What's one startup mistake that founders keep repeating?
Building something that no one wants.
What's the best advice that you received in the IDF?
Don't think of how hard is it to solve the problem. Just go for it.
Yalla. Claude or ChatGPT?
Claude.
What's one word for the next decade?
Utilization.
Wow. Wonderful. Daniel, I have one last question for you. What is the best way for everyone who's watching or listening to this today to get in touch with you, follow you, keep up to date with some of the things that you folks are up to?
Of course. First of all, they can just reach me at LinkedIn, Daniel Zahavi, or they can just go to our website at Arito AI and just get in touch there.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to put the links down at the bottom of the screen and in the description so people can follow and keep up to date and contact you if necessary
Appreciate
or as they want. Daniel, thank you so much for your insights today. I've learned a lot and I can't wait to see how it all goes.
This was a very fun discussion, James. Thank you so much.